When my husband came home with another woman, I asked for a divorce. On Mid-Autumn Festival, Lu Xingji brought home a young and beautiful lady. I recognized her at a glance. She was his childhood sweetheart, his cousin Shen Fu. Instead of siding with me, he shielded her, picking a fight with me right then and there. Even my son Lu Man shouted at me, calling me a shrew. Shen Fu let out a smug sneer. "They don't need you anymore, Ju Yun. It's time for you to get lost." I thought she was right. Pregnant with my second child and weakened by illness, I got nothing but indifference from my husband while he showered her with every possible kindness. My son even begged to sleep in her arms at night, whispering the word mother to her when he thought no one was listening. I packed my bags, took all the gold, silver, and valuables I owned, and eloped with a handsome young man. Who would have thought that just a few days later, Lu Xingji would show up at my door with Lu Man? Both of them crying their eyes out and begging for my forgiveness, but my heart had already turned to stone. There was no going back. "Brother Lu, my husband was killed by bandits. I have no home to return to now." Shen Fu's eyes glistened with tears. Her delicate features twisted in sorrow, so pitiful that anyone would feel sorry for her. Lu Xingji's eyes were filled with deep compassion, his voice trembling as he comforted her. "Don't be sad, Fu. From now on, this is your home. You can stay as long as you want." Shen Fu shot me a nervous glance. Lu Xingji immediately understood what she was worried about. He turned to me, his tone expectant. "Fu is all alone in the world now. If we turn her away, she'll be utterly helpless. You wouldn't stand by and watch that happen, would you, Yun Yang?" I stared at the feast I'd slaved over since dawn, all my appetite vanishing in an instant. "Doesn't she still have her husband's family?" I frowned. "Why did she come all the way here to seek refuge with a distant cousin like you?" After the Mid-Autumn Festival, Lu Xingji would be taking the imperial examination. I'd stayed up all night sewing him a new robe for the test, and caught a bad cold because of it. Just speaking a few words made me break into a fit of coughing, but Lu Xingji acted as if he hadn't heard a thing. His face darkened, his tone firm. "Now that Fu has come to me, it's my duty to protect her." "You'll protect her. But who will protect me?" I thought bitterly to myself. But I loved Lu Xingji deeply, and I couldn't bear to make things difficult for him. "First, take her to rest," I said weakly. "I've caught a cold. Can you take me to see a doctor?" Before I could finish speaking, Lu Xingji had already taken the bundle from Shen Fu's hands and led her to the west courtyard. He tossed me a casual reply over his shoulder. "Dr. Zhong's clinic is quite far from here. Why don't I brew you some chai hu tea instead? It's convenient and works just as well." I wanted to tell him that I had a fever, that I couldn't risk passing the illness to the baby in my womb. Lu Xingji knew perfectly well that I was 2 months pregnant, but at that moment, his mind was completely occupied with Shen Fu. He didn't spare a single thought for our unborn child. Lu Xingji had promised to brew the tea himself, but once he stepped into the west courtyard, he didn't emerge for a long time. My body was burning with fever. I called for a man to bring me a bowl of water, only to realize that he too had snuck off to the west courtyard at some point. I dragged my weak body to the corridor outside the west courtyard, and through the window, I heard the sound of cheerful laughter, 3 people laughing together. A man was calling Shen Fu auntie in the sweetest, most affectionate voice imaginable. "Auntie, you look so pretty when you smile, just like a fairy." I froze in place, a jumble of emotions swirling in my chest. So my son did know how to be sweet and charming, how to curry favor with others. I'd raised him for 6 years, and all this time, he'd been cold and distant toward me. He never clung to me, never called me by any endearing nicknames, never laughed and joked with me. He'd always seemed to have a natural aversion to me. I'd always thought that was just his personality, that he was simply a quiet, reserved child. It turned out I was wrong. By the time Lu Xingji finally remembered his promise, the chai hu tea was already simmering on the stove. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly, trying to sound apologetic. "Yun Yang, I said I'd make the tea. Why didn't you wait for me?" I pushed his hand away when he tried to touch my forehead. "I couldn't wait," I said flatly. "It's the same whether I make it or you do." "Are you angry with me, Yun Yang? Did I do something wrong?" I was too tired to argue with him. I picked up the medicine bowl, ready to pour the tea. But Lu Xingji suddenly reached out to snatch it from my hands. "You rest," he insisted. "Let me do it, I'll pour it for you." I quickly pulled my hand back to avoid him, but in my haste, I knocked over the bowl and the entire stove. The medicine spilled all over the floor, and the broken pieces of the bowl rolled around, finally stopping at Lu Xingji's feet. Both of us stared at the mess in stunned silence. "Lu Xingji." I could no longer contain my anger. I shouted his name at the top of my lungs. Lu Xingji's eyes widened in alarm and anger. His gaze was so fierce, it looked like he wanted to devour me alive. "You shrew, you're nothing but a shrew. You're not allowed to yell at Daddy." "Wah!" Lu Man suddenly burst out of the room, crying loudly as he threw himself in front of Lu Xingji to shield him. "Lu Man, what did you just say?" I was so angry, my lips were trembling. "You're a shrew, a big bad shrew. I hate you. I don't want you to be my mother anymore." Slap. The moment the words left his mouth, a sharp slap landed squarely on his cheek. "Ju Yun, that's going too far. A man is just a child who doesn't know any better. How could you hit him? You're so barbaric. And don't pretend you're sick, I think you're just throwing a tantrum." Lu Xingji's words cut through my heart like a knife. I let out a cold laugh. What a touching father-son bond they shared. When I was pregnant with a man, I'd suffered from severe morning sickness. I couldn't keep anything down, not even a sip of water. I wasted away to a skeleton. Giving birth to him had been a fight for my life. I'd almost died from a difficult labor, but now, the son I'd risked my life to bring into this world was being disrespectful to me, and I wasn't even allowed to discipline him. "Brother Lu, Sister Ju, it's all my fault," Shen Fu said in a timid, soft voice, standing at the door with her bundle slung over her shoulder. "Sister Ju, I'll leave right away. Please don't be angry with Brother Lu anymore, and don't hit a man again. He's such a sweet child, how could you bear to hurt him?" My blood boiled with rage. I snapped at her. "Leave, get out of here right now." "You should have left a long time ago." Shen Fu's face turned deathly pale in an instant. Lu Xingji glared at me, his eyes bloodshot with anger. Lu Man threw his arms around Shen Fu, wailing loudly, "Auntie, don't leave, I want you to stay here and be my mother. Let the shrew go away. Daddy and I both hate her." Lu Xingji's gaze on me was cold as ice. "Ju Yun, you've disappointed me so much. I'm taking a man out for some fresh air. You stay here and reflect on your behavior. You need to learn how to control your temper." With that, he let out a snort of disdain and stormed off, leaving me behind. Shen Fu walked over to me, leaning in to whisper in my ear with a smug sneer, "Ju Yun, they don't need you anymore. It's time for you to get lost. Look, they need me now, at the gate." Lu Xingji was waving at Shen Fu with a smile, Lu Man by his side. Shen Fu skipped over to them happily. I stumbled to the door, leaning against the frame to watch them leave. I saw Lu Xingji holding a man's hand, a man clutching the hem of Shen Fu's dress, all three of them chatting and laughing as they walked toward the Lantern Festival. I leaned against the doorframe, my mind completely blank. I didn't even notice when Jin, the apprentice from Shoyun embroidery shop, walked into the yard. "Mrs. Lu, the dress your husband ordered for you is ready," he said, holding up a vibrant, colorful dress made of fine shoe brocade. "He told us to make sure it was delivered to you before the Mid-Autumn Festival. Our master stayed up all night last night to finish it. Could you please take a look and see if it fits?" I had always preferred plain, understated clothes. I never wore bright colors or flashy fabrics. It was obvious that this dress had been made for Shen Fu, so Lu Xingji had been looking forward to her arrival for a long time. I stared at the dress, my vision suddenly going black. The next moment, I collapsed to the ground. Madam, are you all right?" Jin let out a horrified gasp. Jin carried me to Dr. Zhong's clinic. Dr. Zhong was a skilled physician. After taking 2 doses of his medicine, I immediately felt much lighter and more comfortable. When we left the clinic, Jin insisted on walking me home. As I climbed onto the horse, my hand accidentally brushed against his as he held the reins. His face turned an inexplicable shade of red. When we got back home, Lu Xingji and the others still hadn't returned. I sent Jin on his way, then sat in the courtyard without lighting any lamps, staring up at the bright moon in the sky, lost in thought. I remembered the night I'd fled to this town as a refugee. and been taken in by Lu Xingji's mother. It had been a moonlit night just like this one. At that time, I'd sworn that I would spend the rest of my life repaying Lu Xingji and his mother for their kindness. Lu Xingji had also sworn that he would love me, protect me, and never betray me for as long as he lived. But now, everything had changed. Lu Xingji's mother had passed away 2 years ago. The person he cherished and protected with all his heart was no longer me, it was his childhood sweetheart, his cousin. It wasn't until after curfew that Lu Xingji finally returned home with Shenfu and Lu Man, all three of them in high spirits. Lu Xingji lit the lanterns, when Shenfu saw me sitting in the courtyard like a ghostly figure. She let out a terrified scream. The bag of sugar-fried chestnuts she was holding fell to the ground, spilling everywhere. Ju-Yun, what are you doing sitting here in the middle of the night, acting like a lunatic? You scared a Fu half to death. Lu Xingji glared at me with blazing anger, but when he turned to look at Shenfu, his eyes were filled with tender sympathy. Auntie, don't be afraid, I'm here, I'll protect you, you can have my sugar figurine, tomorrow. I'll ask Daddy to buy you more chestnuts. Lu Man rolled his eyes at me, then held out his precious sugar figurine to Shenfu ingratiatingly. A sharp pain stabbed at my chest. I reached up to touch the scar at the corner of my eye. When a man was 4 years old, I'd just taken a bitter dose of medicine. Lu Xingji had let me take a small bite of a man's sugar figurine to get rid of the bitter taste in my mouth. A man had flown into a rage, snatching the sugar figurine from my hand and smashing it on the ground, then throwing himself on the floor and screaming at the top of his lungs. He'd even scratched me hard at the corner of my eye, drawing blood that streamed down my face. A man had been scared by the sight of the blood, but he'd still kept screaming defiantly. How dare you eat my sugar? Adults eating children's candy, you're so shameless. The memory of that day was still fresh in my mind. The scar on my face hadn't even fully faded yet, but now, he was willing to give his most beloved sugar figurine to Shenfu without a second thought. Get out of my way. He pushed me aside roughly, then took Shenfu's hand and said in a coquettish tone, Auntie, can I sleep with you tonight? The two of them walked toward the west courtyard together, and a man's voice drifted back to me faintly. I wish you could be my real mother soon. I stumbled, barely managing to stay on my feet. Lu Xingji looked at me coldly. It's all your fault for not acting like a proper mother, that's why the child has grown distant from you. Ju-Yun, I truly regret marrying you. At long last, Lu Xingji had finally said what was really on his mind. I steadied myself, then shouted at him, Lu Xingji, tomorrow, you must send Shenfu away. I won't have her staying under this roof any longer. Lu Xingji rolled his eyes at me in disgust. She's just a helpless woman. Why are you being so intolerant of her? Ju-Yun, I never thought you could be so cruel and heartless. You've disappointed me beyond words. With that, he left me standing alone in the courtyard and stormed into the house. I was so angry, I started laughing. Since both the man and the boy were tripping over themselves to curry favor with Shenfu, then I had no reason left to hold back any longer. After all, I'd grown tired of pretending to be a virtuous, obedient wife and mother a long time ago. I owned a restaurant, one I'd bought with my own savings. I packed up several large trunks with the most valuable things in the house, and moved out amid Lu Xingji's livid, sputtering rage. Then I plastered notices all over the city. The owner of Qianwei restaurant was treating everyone to free food and drinks for 3 days, plus the best storyteller in town to put on a show. Naturally, I provided the story material, a tale of a heartless scholar who abandoned his devoted wife for another woman, a disloyal son who turned his back on his own mother, and a scheming vixen who stole the wife's place, forcing the rightful mistress to leave home in humiliation. The townsfolk ate up this juicy scandal, especially since the protagonist was Lu Xingji, the famous local scholar. Overnight, the story of Lu Xingji and Shenfu spread like wildfire. The once admired man of letters was dragged through the mud, cursed by everyone in the city. Some people even couldn't resist going to the Lu mansion to confront Shenfu, splashing horse urine on her, throwing rotten eggs at her, and forcing her to kneel in the street. I rewarded each of those who taught Shenfu a lesson with 20 taels of silver on the spot. Uncle Jen, my accountant, beamed from ear to ear. This is more like our Qianwei restaurant's boss. A man who doesn't avenge a wrong is no man at all. That shameless hussy deserved every bit of it. Uncle Jen had followed me from my hometown. He knew me better than anyone. He took my hand and wiped away his tears. For so many years, you've endured nothing but grievances for Lu Xingji, slaving away for him without a single complaint. But his conscience must have been eaten by dogs. It's just not worth it. I smiled confidently. Don't worry, Uncle Jen, the old Ju-Yoon is back. I used to have a fiery temper, one that brooked no nonsense. I'd clipped my wings, toned down my sharp edges, all for Lu Xingji's sake. Now, I was going to let those edges grow back, sharper than ever. Good news kept pouring in. Shen Fu blamed Lu Xingji for not standing up for her. Lu Xingji resented Shen Fu for her lack of tact, which had ruined his reputation. The two of them erupted into a fierce quarrel, and in a fit of rage, Lu Xingji slapped Shen Fu hard across the face. Then he stormed out alone to drown his sorrows in alcohol. After the restaurant closed for the night, Shen Fu sneaked over to beg me, kneeling at the door and slapping herself repeatedly. Sister Ju-Yoon, please have mercy, spare me a way out. Just hearing her voice made my blood boil. I raised my hand and slapped her right back. Her mouth swelled up instantly. Get lost. Who's your sister? Stop barking like a mad dog here. She clutched her face, terrified, and scurried away with her tail between her legs. The next day, Lu Xingji showed up at my door, haggard and exhausted, to beg for my forgiveness. Yun Yang, I'm begging you, stop this madness. The county magistrate says my moral character is flawed. He's going to strip me of my scholar title. And he won't even let me sit for the autumn imperial examination. He grabbed my sleeve, his face twisted in agony. Have a heart, please, call off the storyteller. I've been humiliated enough. Can't you see I've suffered enough for my mistakes? I let out a cold laugh and yanked my sleeve out of his grasp. Lu Xingji, you're ridiculous. You had the gall to do those things, now you can't stand to have them talked about. You brought this shame on yourself. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Seeing that I was unmoved, Lu Xingji grew desperate. Yun Yang, I only felt sorry for Shen Fu. Nothing improper ever happened between us. Believe me, I swear I never did anything to betray you. I'll send her away right now, I promise. Just give me another chance. I had no patience left for his lies. I called out to my waiter without hesitation. Da Nyo, go report this man to the authorities. Tell them there's a troublemaker causing a scene in my restaurant. Da Nyo answered with a loud yes, and headed for the door. Lu Xingji panicked. In a desperate move, he lunged forward and hugged me tightly. Ju-Yoon, are you truly this heartless? Do you have no regard left for our marriage at all? I struggled to break free, but he only held me tighter. Lu Xingji, let go of me. I can't breathe. Promise me you'll come home with me, and I'll let you go. He thought he could manipulate me like he always had. I snapped, with all my strength. I lifted my foot and kicked him hard in the groin. Lu Xingji let out a blood-curdling scream, pointing at me with a mix of shock and fury. Ju-Yoon, you're insane. You're vulgar, shameless, vicious. With that, he clutched his crotch and fled as fast as his legs could carry him. There wasn't a trace of the refined scholar left in him, only a pathetic, cowardly wretch. In his blind panic, Lu Xingji crashed straight into someone walking past. The man swept his leg out, and Lu Xingji tumbled to the ground face first. I looked closer and saw it was Jin. You little bastard, just you wait. Lu Xingji's face turned crimson with rage. He scrambled to his feet, stumbled, and ran for his life. Mrs. Lu, don't be afraid of him. From now on, I'll protect you, Jin declared solemnly, pounding his chest. I couldn't help but laugh at his earnestness. I can take care of myself. Why would I need someone else to protect me? Then let me stay by your side, please. Ever since the day you saved my life, I've sworn to repay you for the rest of mine. I'm strong. I can do all kinds of work. You won't regret taking me in. I stared at Jin in disbelief. Then suddenly it all clicked. You're that little beggar. Jin nodded his head so hard, I was afraid it would fall off his shoulders. I'd first met Jin 2 years ago. I'd found him in a dark alley, gravely ill, being robbed of his food and beaten senseless by a gang of thugs, humiliated beyond words. When I passed by, he'd been on the verge of death. I'd carried him to Dr. Zhong's clinic, paid his medical bills, and told the doctor to do whatever it took to save him. Then I'd left quietly. Never expecting to see him again, I'd assumed he'd gone back to begging somewhere else after he'd recovered. I'd never dreamed he'd ended up working as an apprentice at Shoyun embroidery shop. Mrs. Lu, please let me stay, I frowned. From now on, don't call me Mrs. Lu anymore. I'm older than you, just call me sister. I refuse to believe you're older than me. Jin flushed bright red, arguing with me hotly, then erupted into cheers when he realized I'd agreed to let him stay. I grew tired of the constant noise at the restaurant, so I asked Jin to rent a quiet house nearby. Once we'd settled in, I registered for the autumn imperial examination under my maiden name, Ju Yoon. In the past, when I'd helped Lu Xingji with his studies, he'd always sighed and said, "Yoon Young, if only I were half as knowledgeable as you. I'm so stupid. Without your help, I'd never have passed the scholar's exam." Little did he know that my father had once been the emperor's own tutor. I'd inherited his vast knowledge, taught by him personally, well versed in astronomy and geography, history and literature, with a photographic memory, but he'd never appreciated any of it. All my hard work, all my help, it had only earned me his disgust in the end. From now on, I was done paving the way for others. I was going to earn my own fame and fortune. Unsurprisingly, I topped the autumn examination with flying colors. Lu Xingji, on the other hand, finished dead last, barely scraping by with a passing grade. The whole town was talking about it, mocking the once great scholar for his obvious decline in talent. I laughed to myself when I heard the rumors. With his meager skills, he didn't stand a chance at the spring imperial examination. To celebrate my victory, Jin dragged me to the night market for hot pot. What a coincidence. We ran straight into Lu Xingji. His eye sockets were sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me dressed in men's clothes, his face lit up with joy, like he'd seen a ghost of his past. He reached out to grab me, but Jin pushed him away roughly. Lu Xingji fell to the ground, but he didn't care. He just stared at me, muttering to himself, "Yoon Yang, you still think of our past. I knew you couldn't have forgotten." The past he was talking about was the early days of our marriage, when Lu Xingji and I had first been wed. We'd had such happy times together. I'd often dressed up as a man and gone out with him. We'd competed in poetry, drunk wine together, and shared countless sweet moments. Now, thinking about those days only made my heart ache with bitterness. I spat at his feet. "Dream on. I'd give anything to lose my memory, to erase every single memory of you from my mind." Then I laughed and walked away with Jin, leaving Lu Xingji sprawled on the ground, wailing like a lost child. "You're lying. You can't mean it. You wouldn't be this cruel to me." A few days later, I was sitting in the courtyard, enjoying the sunshine, when the front door suddenly flew open. Lu Xingji strode in, dragging Lu Man behind him. Then he dropped to his knees in front of me with a loud thud. "Yoon Yang, I'm begging you, come home with me. Mana and I can't live without you." Lu Xingji's face was unshaven, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse and broken. Lu Man looked even worse beside him. He was wearing a dirty, tattered shirt, his face streaked with grime, looking like a little beggar. A big, swollen bump on his forehead was still oozing blood. I stood up, stepping back to avoid him. But Lu Xingji crawled after me on his knees. "Yoon Yang, ever since you left, I haven't been able to eat or sleep. I feel like I've lost my soul." Mana cries for his mother every night. He refuses to go to sleep, refuses to go to school. Those wild boys at the academy bully him constantly, leaving him covered in bruises. Lu Man looked up at me with big, pitiful eyes. His lips trembled, then he burst into tears and threw himself into my arms. I'd already heard the whole story, of course. Shen Fu was lazy and selfish. Not only had she neglected to take care of father and son, she'd even secretly fed Lu Man spoiled food. A few days earlier, Lu Man had gotten food poisoning from eating the rotten food, and Lu Xingji had been forced to carry him to Dr. Zhong's clinic in the middle of the night. Enraged, Lu Xingji had finally kicked Shen Fu out of the house for good. "Mother, Mana knows he was wrong. I'll never make you angry again. Please come home with us. Mother." He sobbed into my chest, rubbing his head against me like a hurt little animal. After all, he was the child I'd carried in my womb for 10 months. The child I'd risked my life to give birth to. My heart softened for a split second. But only a split second. Lu Man, I've told you before, real men don't cry easily. Stop crying, wipe your tears, and go home with your father. And remember, if anyone ever bullies you again, fight back with your fists. Lu Man nodded eagerly through his tears. Home, mother, let's go home. I pulled my hand out of his grasp and shook my head firmly. My home is here now, go with your father. Don't ever come back here again. Lu Man froze, terrified by my words. He let out a wail of despair, but when he saw me frown, he quickly wiped his tears away, too scared to disobey. Mother, I'll be good, I'll be a perfect boy. Please don't abandon me. Lu Xingji also begged frantically. Yun Yang, I've already chased Shen Fu away. I promise you I'll never see her again for as long as I live. You've forgotten your mother's kindness to you. When he mentioned his mother, I paused for a moment. After my parents passed away, it was his mother who'd taken me in and raised me, who'd let me stay in their home. I'd stayed there for 10 long years. I'd become Lu Xingji's wife, born him a son, taken care of his mother until her dying day, and buried her with full honors when she'd passed away. When I was a child, my father had praised me for my exceptional talent, saying I was a walking encyclopedia of knowledge. After his mother had died suddenly, I'd used my own vast knowledge to help Lu Xingji with his studies, enabling him to become the very first scholar in Yunsheng County. But he'd grown tired of my constant guidance, my constant presence. He'd started to resent me for it. Lu Xingji, you're the one who drove me away. I've never failed your mother's kindness to me, I said coldly, without a trace of emotion. I turned and walked back into the house, then returned with a divorce deed in my hand. I threw it hard at his face. Sign this. From now on, don't ever come pestering me again. You disgust me. And you, Lu Man, as of today, we're breaking our mother-son bond. I'm no longer your mother. Don't you dare follow in your father's footsteps, coming here to beg for my forgiveness like a shameless beggar. Lu Xingji's face turned deathly pale. He stared at me in shock, as if he was looking at a complete stranger, as if he'd been struck by lightning. Lu Man ran over to tug at my sleeve, but I pushed him away forcefully. Lu Xingji finally found his voice, looking at me like I was a monster. Juyun, have you gone mad? How dare you divorce your husband? Do you want to leave yourself with no way out? I knew exactly what he meant. According to the laws of the Great Shang dynasty, a woman who divorced her husband was committing a crime. She would be expelled from her clan, demoted to the status of a lowly commoner, and forbidden from remarrying for the rest of her life. I smiled calmly and serenely. As long as I can divorce you, I don't care about any of that. Lu Xingji stamped his feet in rage, glared at me for a moment, then suddenly burst into loud, mocking laughter. Juyun, have you forgotten? You're still carrying my child in your womb. You think you can divorce me? Dream on. The Great Shang dynasty had another law. If a pregnant woman dared to divorce her husband, she would be sentenced to death. Lu Xingji looked triumphant beyond words. Juyun, I'll give you 3 days. 3 days from now, I'll come to take you home. With that, he grabbed Lu Man's hand and strode away, laughing maniacally. My fingers tightened around the doorframe until my knuckles turned white, and a cold sneer curled my lips. Lu Xingji, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you. When Jin came home that night and heard about Lu Xingji's outburst, he was so angry he wanted to go out and settle the score with him immediately. I quickly stopped him, my face expressionless. Go find me a midwife instead. I want to abort this child. Jin's mouth dropped open in shock as he stared at me, but he quickly regained his composure. Are you sure your body can handle this? I'll be fine. Hurry. In truth, I had overheard Dr. Zhong talking to Jin the very first time he'd felt my pulse. He'd said the fetus in my womb was showing signs of a threatened miscarriage. All this time, Jin had been secretly giving me medicine to keep the pregnancy going. Otherwise, I would have already lost the baby. I had originally planned to wait until after the spring imperial examination to deal with this, but now, I couldn't stand to wait another second. I wanted to cut off all ties with Lu Xingji once and for all. Jin wasted no time in finding a midwife to help me terminate the pregnancy. But no one could have predicted that as soon as the fetus was aborted, I would suffer a massive hemorrhage. Fortunately, Jin had been too worried to let me take the risk alone. He had secretly arranged for Dr. Zhong to wait at the house in advance. Dr. Zhong did everything in his power, using countless rare and precious medicinal herbs, to finally stop the bleeding. When I woke up, Zhong told me that Jin had been the one to procure all those rare herbs. I watched Jin bustling about the room, taking care of me tirelessly, and a wave of confusion washed over me. How had he managed to get his hands on those herbs? Some of them were so rare that even Zhong had only heard of them, never seen them with his own eyes. Though I'd narrowly escaped death, my body was extremely weak, and I couldn't even get out of bed. Jin was racked with guilt, taking care of my every need day and night without ever taking off his clothes to rest. He'd lost a frightening amount of weight. I was somewhat surprised that 3 days had come and gone, and Lu Xingji still hadn't shown up. The courtyard was eerily quiet, too quiet. While Jin was out boiling medicine for me, I forced myself to get out of bed and stagger over to the window to look outside. What I saw made my blood run cold. Several men dressed in black, carrying swords, were patrolling back and forth outside the courtyard wall. I couldn't help but ask Jin about it when he returned. Lu Xingji kept coming around to pester you, Jin said casually. I hired a few bodyguards to scare him off, so he wouldn't disturb your peace. His explanation sounded plausible enough, but no matter how I looked at it, those men didn't seem like ordinary bodyguards. The people of Yunshan County were simple and kind-hearted. Even though I was new to the area, my neighbors had been nothing but friendly to me. When they hadn't seen me for several days, they asked Jin how I was doing. Jin only told them I was sick and resting at home, but they insisted on coming to visit me anyway. Aunt Wang brought over a pot of fragrant fish soup. Aunt Hua carried a bowl of warm egg custard, urging me to eat it while it was hot. Aunt Hua's daughter, Shimei, followed timidly behind her mother. The girl was about 6 or 7 years old, roughly the same age as Lu Man. She didn't seem interested in the delicious food at all. Instead, her eyes were fixed intently on the inkstone on my desk. Her gaze filled with longing. Does your daughter go to school? I asked Aunt Hua. We wish we could send her. Aunt Hua sighed. But we're too poor. We have to save what little money we have for her younger brother. Girls like her, they'll just get married sooner or later anyway. That's their fate. Aunt Hua, you're wrong, I said, my voice filled with sudden passion. Girls need to go to school even more than boys do. Mother, I don't want to get married, I want to go to school. Shimei looked up at Aunt Hua with big, pleading eyes, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't help but sigh inwardly. People really were so different. Lu Man had had me tutoring him since he was little, yet he'd never been the least bit eager to learn. Shimei, on the other hand, came from a poor family, but she would do anything to have the chance to study. Are there many girls in town who go to school? I asked. Aunt Hua shook her head. I set down the bowl of egg custard in my hand. Aunt Hua, send Shimei to my house in a few days. I'll teach her how to read and write. Really, that would be wonderful. Aunt Hua was so excited she could barely speak, grinning from ear to ear as she exchanged glances with Shimei. Ms. Ju, can my daughter Xiaotsue come learn from you too? Aunt Wang, who was standing nearby, quickly piped up, afraid she'd miss the chance. Of course, all the girls in the neighborhood who don't have the opportunity to go to school are welcome here. Could you two please help me spread the word? As soon as I finished speaking, Aunt Hua and Aunt Wang rushed off excitedly, going door to door to tell everyone the good news. Jin, tomorrow I want you to find someone to clean out one of the rooms in the house. I'm going to open Yunshan County's very first girls' school here. I was going to teach these girls how to read and write. I was going to make them understand that a woman's life wasn't meant to be spent solely on serving her husband and raising children, wasting away in the drudgery of daily chores. They deserved so much more than that. The school was up and running in no time. The bodyguards Jin had hired ended up staying permanently. They were stern and silent, following Jin around like shadows wherever he went. In addition to reading and writing, Jin volunteered to teach the children martial arts. He said that my students had to be well versed in both literary and martial arts, but I never could have imagined just how skilled he was. His martial arts prowess was so extraordinary, it sent a chill down my spine. I recognized the set of fist techniques he was teaching them. I'd seen them before in the rubbings of ancient manuscripts my father had shown me. It was a unique fist style created personally by the current emperor when he'd fought to conquer the empire on horseback. After finishing a demonstration of the fist style, Jin noticed that I was staring at him with wide eyes. He couldn't help but look rather pleased with himself. Well, am I not incredibly heroic and valiant? I nodded calmly on the surface, but inside, my mind was reeling with shock. Jin dressed simply, yet he carried himself with a natural air of nobility and grace. Jin had been able to get his hands on rare medicinal herbs that even Dr. Zhong had never seen before. Jin knew the exclusive fist style passed down only to members of the imperial family. Just who exactly are you, Jin? Time passed quickly. Before I knew it, the next year's spring imperial examination was drawing near. Shimei, Xiaotsue, and the other girls had learned a great deal. They could now speak eloquently when talking to the villagers, earning themselves the admiration of everyone in town, who praised me for teaching a group of female scholars. They carried themselves with poise and confidence, their faces glowing with bright, radiant smiles. In just half a year, they had transformed into completely different people, unrecognizable from the shy, timid girls they'd been before. It was true, after all, for a woman. Knowledge in her mind was far more dazzling than any rouge or powder on her face. I was filled with eager anticipation. Determined to top the spring imperial examination, I heard that Lu Xingji had been studying like mad lately, swearing that he would take first place in the spring exam. I laughed to myself. He really had no idea how little talent he actually had. On the day before the exam, Jin took the bodyguards out to handle some business. Taking advantage of Jin's absence, Lu Xingji sneaked over to the school to beg me to come home. He knelt outside the courtyard wall, pleading with me miserably. He seemed to have been drinking, slamming his fists against the gate as he rambled incoherently. "You're still pregnant. What are you doing running a school like this? You'll wear yourself out, and you'll put the baby in your womb at risk. Don't worry, once I've earned my official title, I'll be your rock. I'll definitely take first place in this spring's exam, and then I'll come to take you home in style." I was so angry I almost laughed out loud. Him. Take first place. Dream on. I threw open the gate, looking at him with a sneer of contempt. "Lu Xingji, I already had the abortion. From this day forward, I have absolutely no ties left to you. Now hurry up and press your fingerprint on that divorce deed. I'm tired of waiting." Lu Xingji stumbled backward, collapsing to his knees on the ground. The look of utter despair in his eyes was almost painful to watch. "Juyun, why must you be so heartless? If this is how it's going to be, then what's the point of me even living anymore?" With that, he threw his head back and let out a dramatic wail, then lunged toward the wall, intending to bash his head against it. But Shimei and Xiaotsue heard the commotion and ran outside, quickly grabbing hold of Lu Xingji. They picked up handfuls of dirt from the ground and stuffed them into his mouth. "Beat him up. His mouth stinks. He's so noisy. MS. Ju is like a mother to us. Anyone who bullies our mother will beat them to a pulp." The two girls proceeded to kick and punch Lu Xingji mercilessly. Even though they were only young girls, they fought with such ferocity that Lu Xingji was completely defenseless, cowering on the ground and covering his head with his hands. In the end, he had no choice but to scramble to his feet and flee for his life. The other children clapped their hands and laughed uproariously at the sight of him running away like a coward. When Jin returned home and heard what had happened, he picked up Shimei and Xiaotsue, one in each arm, and praised them warmly. "Well done. If that scoundrel ever dares to show his face here again, you beat him up just like that." It was then that I noticed something different about Jin. Today, he was wearing a luxurious black silk cloak that made him look impossibly noble and imposing. It was a style I had never seen before. I mentioned it casually, as if it were just a passing thought. "I heard that the crown prince, who went missing 6 years ago, has finally been found and brought back to the palace." The emperor was overjoyed and announced a general amnesty for the entire nation. This year, anyone can take the imperial examination, regardless of their family background or social status. "Jin, you're so skilled in martial arts. Why don't you go take the military imperial examination and become a top military scholar?" Jin laughed it off, shaking his head. "If I became a top military scholar, I'd have to serve as a royal bodyguard for the emperor. I don't want that. I only want to be your personal bodyguard." I watched him as he grinned and joked around, a sense of confusion washing over me. when the results of the spring imperial examination were posted, Lu Xingji's name was at the very top. He'd taken first place. He was so overjoyed that he danced around like a madman, running through the busy streets and telling everyone he met the good news. But his joy didn't last long. Before he could even finish celebrating, he was arrested and thrown into prison, and I was arrested along with him, because there were 2 names at the top of the list and both of our essays were identical, word for word. The emperor was furious beyond measure. He personally ordered both me and Lu Xingji to be brought before him for questioning. The emperor's divine majesty would not tolerate such deception. Before the emperor even had a chance to ask his first question, I began to discuss the most brilliant and inspired passages of the essay in detail. I spoke with perfect confidence and eloquence, articulating my ideas clearly and logically. Lu Xingji, on the other hand, stammered and stumbled over his words, contradicting himself at every turn. The truth was crystal clear. There was no longer any doubt as to who the real author was. The emperor was enraged. He shot Lu Xingji a glare that silenced him instantly. Lu Xingji collapsed to the ground, his body trembling violently like a leaf in the wind. He knelt there, sneaking a glance at me out of the corner of his eye. I could read the look in his eyes perfectly. It was a look of bitter accusation and resentment. Several years ago, I had made Lu Xingji memorize that exact essay word for word. He'd never dreamed that he would encounter the exact same topic on the imperial examination. He'd thought it was the luckiest stroke of good fortune imaginable, copying the essay verbatim without a second thought, and he'd never, ever imagined that I would be taking the examination too. I had also copied the essay word for word deliberately. In Lu Xingji's eyes, I had set a trap for him on purpose. I couldn't have cared less what he thought. I didn't even bother to explain myself. The emperor immediately ordered his guards to drag Lu Xingji back to prison. As the guards hauled him away, he burst into hysterical tears, screaming my name at the top of his lungs. Yunyang, save me, please save me. I shrugged my shoulders helplessly. It was the emperor himself who was sentencing him. There was nothing I could do to help him. I knelt down before the emperor and kowtowed deeply to him. Zhu Yun is guilty of deceiving your majesty. I thank you for sparing my life. The man sitting on the dragon throne stood up and walked straight toward me, reaching out a trembling hand to help me to my feet. Are you the orphan of Zhu Huayan? I nodded my head vigorously, my face pressed to the ground. The emperor told me to lift my head, then stared at me intently for a long time, a look of profound emotion flickering in his eyes. It makes sense now. Who else but his daughter could have written an essay like that? Yes, only the former imperial tutor, Grand Secretary Zhu Huayan, could have written an essay of such profound insight and wisdom. How could the emperor not recognize it? That essay had been a memorial my father had presented to the emperor many years ago, when the empire had first been unified, using examples from ancient history to offer advice on governing the nation. The emperor personally helped me to my feet, his voice thick with unspeakable sorrow and regret. It's all my fault. I failed your father so miserably. As the emperor's tutor and a respected minister who had served 3 consecutive reigns, my father was a man of unwavering integrity. Time and again, he had admonished the emperor to root out corruption in the officialdom, to stay away from sycophants, and to promote virtuous and capable ministers. For this, he had made himself a thorn in the side of many corrupt officials, who had repeatedly framed him with false charges. In the end, he had even lost the emperor's favor and trust, when he was falsely accused of colluding with the enemy and betraying the nation, of harboring treasonous intentions. My father, a man of unparalleled virtue and noble character, chose to take his own life to prove his innocence. After my father's death, which had clearly demonstrated his loyalty to the country, the emperor was consumed by profound regret. In the years that followed, the emperor's longing for my father's wisdom and integrity only grew stronger. The essay topic given in this imperial examination, though unorthodox, was actually the emperor's way of expressing his grief and remembrance for my father. If my father's spirit were watching from the afterlife, he would surely be able to rest in peace at last. Zhu Yun, the emperor said, his eyes filled with earnest warmth as he looked at me. I shall grant you one wish. Whatever you desire, speak it aloud. A thought immediately flashed through my mind. I asked the emperor to allow me to divorce my husband. According to the laws of the Great Shang dynasty, a woman who divorced her husband was sentenced to death. But I had no desire to die. I still had so many things left to do. I only wanted to stay far away from Lu Xingji and live a happy and fulfilling life. The emperor stroked his long beard, his brows furrowing slightly as he regarded me, feeling a surge of anxiety. I knelt down again and kowtowed deeply to him. I humbly implore your majesty to grant this wish for your humble servant. I had made up my mind, if the emperor did not agree today, I would kneel here forever and never get up. After a long moment of silence, the emperor's voice finally rang out. You are the daughter of my beloved teacher. I will never let anyone bully you with impunity. As for that scoundrel of a husband of yours, not only will you be allowed to divorce him, but he shall also be punished for his crimes. These unjust and unreasonable laws are long overdue for reform. The emperor's typically mild and deliberate temperament nearly drove me to the brink of frustration. But then he sighed and added, Silly girl, do you have no other wishes? I could arrange a new marriage for you, a far better match than that worthless man. Or perhaps, the emperor continued, speaking more to himself than to me, I shall simply bestow a great honor upon you. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, so hard I could barely breathe. I dared not lift my head, my eyes fixed intently on the hem of the black silk robe of the man standing beside the emperor, my mind racing a mile a minute. Then, suddenly, I spoke up, Your Majesty, your humble servant has just remembered another wish. I earnestly beg your majesty to grant it. The emperor's interest was piqued. Oh, speak, and I shall listen. I wish to become a female official, I declared. My voice steady and resolute, I wish to carry on my late father's legacy and share the burden of governing the nation for your majesty. As for marriage, if I cannot find a man who truly suits me, I am willing to remain unmarried for the rest of my life. The man in the black silk robe suddenly froze in his tracks. In the next instant, he reached out and grabbed me by the collar, yanking me roughly to my feet. He ground his teeth as he spoke, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and hurt. No man who truly suits you, Ju-yoon, you heartless woman. I refused to back down, staring directly into his eyes as I struggled to free myself from his grasp. Ju-yoon pays her respects to Crown Prince Jin. May your royal highness be well. A look of awkwardness crossed Jin's face as he released his grip on me, his voice sounding somewhat muffled and dejected. So you knew all along? Jin was none other than Xiao Jin, the crown prince of the Great Shang dynasty. I had known his true identity for quite some time. I had simply chosen not to expose him. I turned my back to him, refusing to look at him. But out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of the emperor and Xiao Jin exchanging mischievous glances. The emperor was clearly gesturing for Xiao Jin to go and coax me. I had never imagined that the emperor possessed such a playful, mischievous side. It was rather endearing, actually. Still, Xiao Jin had kept his true identity from me for so long. I was determined to make him pay for it and give him a good scolding. In the end, the emperor granted my request. I was officially appointed as the very first female minister in the history of the Great Shang dynasty. Clad in my official robe, I stood tall and proud, filled with a sense of purpose and resolve. Almost overnight, I became a role model for all the women in the imperial capital, praised and admired by everyone, by the emperor's imperial edict. Lu Xingji was exiled to a remote and bitterly cold borderland. He wore heavy shackles around his wrists and ankles, his face branded with the mark of a criminal, and he limped heavily as he walked. His leg had been broken by other prisoners while he was in jail, before leaving him to suffer. His attackers had sneered at him and said, when debts are owed, they must be repaid. We're only doing this for the money. It was a young lady named Shen Fu who hired us to teach you a lesson. Don't blame us. Upon hearing Shen Fu's name, Lu Xingji was overcome with a violent rage. He screamed and shouted at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing through the prison cells. Shen Fu, you wicked, evil woman, I'll kill you for this. After being driven away by Lu Xingji, Shen Fu had been kidnapped by a gang of bandits and sold to a brothel, where she was subjected to endless abuse and humiliation every single day. It wasn't long before she contracted a venereal disease. Shen Fu hated Lu Xingji with a burning passion. She blamed him entirely for her tragic fate. convinced that it was he who had ruined her life, and so, she had secretly bribed a group of thugs in the prison to make sure they took good care of Lu Xingji, beating him senseless at every opportunity. As a result, Lu Xingji had been repeatedly beaten and tortured in prison, until his leg was finally broken beyond repair. Even if he hadn't been exiled to the borderlands, he would have eventually been beaten to death in that cell. After learning of his impending exile, Lu Xingji had sent someone to deliver a message, begging me to see him one last time before he left. I had no desire to meet with him at first, but I eventually relented, unable to bear the messenger's repeated pleas on his behalf. On the day he was to depart, I waited for him at the prison gate. The guards dragged him past me, his head hanging low in defeat. When he looked up and saw me standing there, tears streamed down his face in an endless flood. He fell to his knees with a loud thud, right at my feet. "Ju-yoon," he sobbed, his voice choked with regret. "I was a fool who didn't know how lucky I was to have you. I never cherished you when I had the chance. I deserve every bit of this suffering." After weeping bitterly for a long while, he suddenly let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "If there really is an afterlife, please wait for me so that I can finally atone for all my sins against you. Will you?" I couldn't help but find his words utterly ridiculous. If there really were a next life, I would run as far away from him as possible. I wanted nothing to do with his so-called atonement. Seeing that I remained silent, Lu Xingji let out a long, sorrowful sigh. His eyes red and swollen from crying, he bowed deeply to me, his forehead nearly touching the ground. "Yunyang, take care of yourself." His eyes were filled with an unbearable sense of longing and regret as he turned and limped slowly away, his figure growing smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared from sight. I watched his retreating back, letting out a long, deep breath of relief. Thank goodness, at long last, he was gone. "Mother!" A sudden shout jolted me out of my thoughts, making me jump in surprise. Before I knew it, Lu Man had run up to me, surrounded by a group of other children. He pointed at me proudly, declaring to the other kids in a loud, triumphant voice, "Look, this is my mother." The other children stared at me, then at Lu Man, clearly not believing a word he said. They called him a liar and chased after him, determined to give him a good beating. Lu Man ran as fast as his legs could carry him, screaming over his shoulder, "Mother, mother, save me." I stood there motionless, watching calmly as the other children tackled him to the ground and began to pummel him. Only then did I speak up. "Who exactly are you calling mother? Shenfu isn't here, you know." Lu Man froze in place, stunned into silence. He hung his head, unable to say a single word in response. The other children began to jeer and taunt him mercilessly. Lu Man lifted his head defiantly, his chin jutting out stubbornly. "You are my mother, don't pretend you're not." I looked at him with a cool, amused expression on my face. "Oh, but I seem to remember you calling Shenfu mother too." Lu Man's head drooped even lower, and he fell completely silent, unable to refute my words. I frowned slightly. This child had such a terrible memory. It felt like only yesterday that he had helped Lu Xingji and Shenfu bully me, adding insult to injury when I was already at my lowest point. It felt like only yesterday that he had ganged up with Lu Xingji to drive me out of the house. He might have forgotten, but I certainly hadn't. Come to think of it, hadn't he always bragged about how close he was to his father? Now that Lu Xingji was being exiled to the harsh borderlands, how could I possibly leave his beloved son all alone here in the capital? I immediately gave the necessary orders to ensure that Lu Man would be sent to the borderlands to follow his father, never to return. Having made all the arrangements, I felt utterly exhausted. Those two father and son had caused me nothing but heartache and trouble. When I finally returned to my residence, I was surprised to find Xiao Jin waiting for me, a look of deep distress on his handsome face. "Ju-yoon," he said, his voice filled with hurt and accusation, "how could you say that you couldn't find a man who suits you? What am I to you?" I felt like I was going to suffocate from frustration. Xiao Jin was still obsessing over the words I had spoken in the imperial palace the previous day. "I thought of you as the crown prince," I snapped at him, unable to hide my irritation. I rolled my eyes inwardly. "Your Royal Highness, could you please stop being so ridiculous?" I wanted to explain myself to him, but I simply didn't know where to begin. But Xiao Jin only became more insistent, his expression growing increasingly hurt. He reached out and took my hands in his grip gentle but firm as he looked deeply into my eyes. "Tell me the truth, what are you really thinking?" Seeing the pained expression on his face, I decided to stop beating around the bush and speak my mind plainly. "It's because I'm not sure," I admitted, my voice softening slightly. "I'm not sure if I can ever love someone with all my heart again, the way I used to. I'm afraid I won't be able to give you everything you deserve, Xiao Jin. It wouldn't be fair to you if we were to be together like this. Besides," I added, looking away from him, "I still have so many things I want to accomplish with my life. I don't have the energy to spare for love and romance right now." After I finished speaking, Xiao Jin fell silent, his gaze fixed intently on my face. After a long, tense moment, he finally spoke, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "Then I'll wait for you. Is that all right? I'll wait until you're sure of your own heart. Until you're ready to let me in, until you're willing to share your life with me." I was left completely speechless, unable to find the words to respond to him. The truth was, I had already fallen in love with Xiao Jin a long time ago. I just hadn't wanted to rush into another relationship so soon after my painful divorce from Lu Xingji. As Xiao Jin had said, I needed time to be sure of my own feelings. Perhaps that time wouldn't be too far away after all. In the 21st year of the Great Shang dynasty, the late emperor passed away, and Xiao Jin ascended the throne as the new emperor of the Great Shang dynasty. Under his wise and benevolent rule, the nation flourished and prospered, enjoying an era of unprecedented peace and stability. Xiao Jin governed the country with compassion and kindness. Shortly after ascending the throne, he issued a decree granting a general amnesty to all prisoners in the nation. Regardless of the severity of their crimes, this amnesty even extended to the remote and desolate borderlands. It was through this amnesty that news of Lu Xingji's fate finally reached me. It turned out that Lu Xingji had died in the second year after his exile to the borderlands. He had been nothing but a weak and pampered scholar all his life, completely unable to endure the harsh and brutal living conditions of the borderlands, plagued by constant feelings of bitterness and resentment. Coupled with his severe injuries, he had caught a severe cold one winter and had never recovered. Despite Lu Man's best efforts to take care of him, there was nothing anyone could do to save him. After suffering through months of agonizing pain and suffering, he had finally breathed his last breath. After Lu Xingji's death, Lu Man had been too poor to afford a proper burial for him. He had been forced to dig a shallow grave in the frozen ground and bury his father's body there. But that night, wild dogs had dug up Lu Xingji's corpse and devoured it, leaving nothing but a pile of bones behind. When Lu Man had discovered what had happened, he had cried bitterly for hours on end, desperate to bring his father's remains back to the Central Plains for a proper burial. But he had been penniless and completely stranded in the harsh borderlands, with no way to return home. In a desperate bid to survive and fulfill his filial duty, Lu Man had been forced to sell himself into slavery. Unfortunately, he had been sold to two different masters, both of whom had been cruel and brutal men with violent tempers. They had beaten and abused him mercilessly at the slightest provocation. After years of endless torment and suffering, Lu Man had eventually become a cripple. Just like his father before him, he would never be able to return to his homeland again. The second thing Xiao Jin did after ascending the throne was to propose marriage to me. He had done so with the utmost sincerity, vowing to make me his empress and to share his throne and his kingdom with me for the rest of our lives. By that time, I had already risen to the position of Grand Secretary, the most powerful female official in the entire Great Shang dynasty. Under my careful guidance and tutelage, Shimei and Xiaotsue had also gone on to become accomplished scholars in their own right. Serving as official librarians in the imperial palace, with all my other responsibilities finally settled, I at long last had the time and energy to focus on my relationship with Xiao Jin. Xiao Jin had waited for me for 7 long years. During those 7 years, he had never taken a single concubine or mistress, remaining completely faithful to me the entire time. I often thought that 7 years was a significant turning point in a person's life. My marriage to Lu Xingji had begun to fall apart in our 7th year together, but Xiao Jin was nothing like Lu Xingji. Even after 7 long years, his feelings for me remained as strong and as passionate as they had been on the day we first met. In the imperial court, he was a powerful and majestic emperor, commanding the respect and admiration of all his subjects. But once he left the palace and returned home to me, he became as gentle and obedient as a well-behaved kitten. He would massage my shoulders and back whenever I was tired, doing exactly as I asked without a single complaint. He would even boast proudly, declaring his intention to be a doting husband for the rest of his life. With such a sincere and devoted man by my side, how could I possibly refuse his heartfelt proposal? And so, on the day he sent his official betrothal gifts to my residence, with a grand procession stretching for miles, filled with countless treasures and gifts, I finally nodded my head and said yes. On our wedding night, inside the magnificent Jiaofeng Palace, Xiao Jin had taken me into his arms and looked deeply into my eyes, his voice filled with tender affection as he asked me, "Yun Yang, am I the man who truly suits you?" I smiled softly at him, my heart overflowing with love and happiness. "Yes," I replied, my voice warm and sincere, "you most certainly are." Before I could finish speaking, Xiao Jin had pulled me into his arms and lowered the silk curtains around us, and then, he kissed me deeply, his lips meeting mine in a passionate embrace that would last for a lifetime.